Welcome back to another episode of The Pursuit of Creativity. I'm your host, Ikey Ajavon, and today I'm joined by Annie Odell, a creative thinker and storyteller with a passion for curiosity and self-expression. In our conversation, Annie shares her powerful insights into how curiosity and intentional living can not only ignite creativity, but also happiness. We talk about her unique 4 points of happiness framework and how something as simple as making a sandwich, trust me, can reshape the way you think about creativity. If you've ever felt stuck, uninspired, or wondering how to bring more joy and creativity into everyday life, I think this episode is for you. So without further ado, let's dive in.
Hi, Ikey. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to chat with you. I have lots of questions. But with this season, I want to kick things off with I guess you could say it's a deep question, but one that kind of stands to the idea of the podcast, which is, what does creativity mean to you?
Ooh, that's such a good question. I feel like there's different ways I think about creativity, right? Creativity, for many intents and purposes, is not a linear source, but I think that's what it means to me. It's like, where does your source of inspiration come from? And I think part of the flip side of that is around curiosity, right? Creativity is how curious can you be, and what do you do with that curiosity once inspiration strikes? And so to me, it's not about where do you find it, it's where do you cultivate it.
Ooh, I like that. Okay, so you mentioned curiosity when you're talking about what creativity means to you. In your role doing social media, like how do you use curiosity to improve your work?
Like, there's two ways to kind of look at it, right? One is like noting what you're most curious about. I think especially as we like look at the social media landscape today, right? This is an area that is booming with creativity. Everywhere you turn, you see these really incredible people that are sharing ideas or acting out skits or doing these like really kind of entertaining, talented things. I mean, right, there's a whole gamut. So when you're looking and you're seeing all these different sources of creativity, I think what you have to note about yourself is like, what about that piece really kind of sparked your interest? I think a lot of times we think of scrolling as like doom scrolling. And I work with some really great people in the industry. One of them is a journalist, and she really talks about like, how do we build healthy habits online? And I think the extension of that is, she says, when you go online, you need to be intentional about what you're looking for. And so I think it's really easy for us as like non-industry folk to be like part of the regular masses, just scrolling. But I think when we're looking for, oh, there's an idea that's swirling in my head and I want to figure out, how do I communicate this story, right? And I think that goes back to what I was saying with like starting as a journalist. Like, that's always what I've looked at. Like, what is that storytelling through line? What is that narrative? How is it going to relate to people? But also, how am I feeling when I consume someone else's source of, entertainment or what they've done? And where do you learn? And how do you continue to like hone into like your own version of that? Does that make sense? What do you do? What does yours
Yeah.
look like?
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think there's so much, I love the word, I've been loving the word intentionality. And I feel like a lot of what you just mentioned is like touches on that, like the idea that like, if you search and look and consume all this stuff with like that lens that you're looking for something specific, like a journalist, like you mentioned, then it can actually serve you in a really, really good way versus like the actual doom scrolling and stuff. But to answer your question, I think very similarly, like I have to consciously think about the difference between just scrolling for entertainment and like scrolling for like a work purpose or like zoning in. And luckily, because of the way my feed is curated, like I control it, I can like, it like goes in and out, or I'll see something, I'm like, oh, this is really cool. And I've been doing a lot of screenshotting lately, and that has been like, it sounds so like some revelation. I've been screenshotting lately, but I've been screenshotting a lot lately, and then going back and using that as inspiration to create stuff for myself on my own social media. And then that sometimes feeds into the stuff that we do I do for my job. So yeah, I'm right there with you, like trying to be intentional and looking for the stuff.
Yeah, I think like what's, interesting about kind of the way we save stuff, right? I almost like on Instagram it's almost easier because you can save it to a folder
Mm-hmm.
and you can go back. Like I have friends that when they're having a bad day, they save all their favorite memes and funny videos so that they can go and be like, okay, yeah, that's going to put me in a better mood. But I love the idea of kind of like having that space for you to say like, oh, these really kind of intrigued me.
Mm-hmm.
And because, like I think that's the other thing, right? And I'm sure you've run across this. You find something that's like really compelling and interesting, and you're like, oh, that's so good, and you don't really have anything to do with it at that moment. But
Mm-hmm.
in a month, right, with the way we consume information, like it could completely be gone. So how do we like save it, find it, like use that as a reference point? I mean, one of the other things I did like through school and throughout my career is I've had this like interesting tandem with design and kind of art. And for, a good while I was like a page designer at a newspaper.
Oh,
um,
that's really
but
cool.
yeah,
I
I've
didn't know that.
ooh, fun facts. Yeah, so it was weird. So it was like some of it was just like basic, like, page layout. But then, once a month I would get to go into like InDesign and Illustrator and create like a almost like an infographic. I mean, this was like 2008, right?
Mm-hmm.
Infographics were just a thing. One of my mentors at the time was the old creative director at Newsweek, which was super interesting because he really kind of taught what works for the public. But then here I am working with students and designers and people that are totally outside like the word world, and the way that they look at art is like constantly, they just have books of,
Mm-hmm.
and so to me, like if you come to my apartment, I have like coffee table books everywhere because sometimes you just gotta flip and sit. And so I think it's important to see what people are doing online, but it's also important to cultivate inspiration like in your own home,
Yeah.
right? And to have things that are always going to spark joy. And so, or not joy, but spark that moment of curiosity and creativity and like, ooh, I could do
Yeah.
something with that. And it was always fun because like, my editor at the time, the design editor, one time I remember we were building a new building. And this was when I was working at the college paper. And so it was going to be on campus, and there were no renderings really
Mm-hmm.
to share or show. And he said, wouldn't it be so cool if you like built one in InDesign and then drew the other half with like pencil? And I was like, what? And it took me like a month to figure out like his vision because
Yeah.
it wasn't my own, it wasn't originated from me. And so I think there's a lot to be said for collaboration, but also understanding like what the vision is and where you can stretch your own skills, right? And I think that's a big part of creativity is like, oh, I might fail at this
Mm.
moment and I might not be perfect. And for me, right, like my work, what I do, I have always been like an overachiever, a people pleaser. Like
Yeah.
I want things to be good and right, and I want to blow people away from the first moment. And creativity doesn't come out perfect. And
Yeah.
and so there's definitely like a journey of where do you really like take it and run with it and then come back and rework it. I mean, and I think that goes into imposter syndrome, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
as you get older. But I don't know, what do you think? What's your kind of source around that?
Yeah, trying to figure out so many amazing sparks just went off listening to you speak just now, and I'm like, okay, trying to like put in the right filing cabinets in my head
Yeah.
to like go back to the answer question. But I think probably cultivating a space that is creative is such an important aspect, and the room I'm recording in right now is one of those places where I'm like, oh, this is where I do creative stuff. Nice. I get in here, I can do the thing. It
Mm,
feels good. And I've read or listened to or watched TikToks about how creating like a space or even just like having cues around you that kind of not trigger but like amp up your brain to be like, okay, yes, let me be creative, let me do that. And you mentioned like coffee table books and things like that. So yeah, just trying to find that inspiration, and music is a big place for me for that too. So like, and I found living in New York City because I don't drive ever. I used to listen to a lot of music in the car
Uh-huh.
before I moved here, and that was really helpful for just like, I don't know, maybe it's like zoning out to like just let your brain kind of play. But I don't get that here because I don't drive anywhere, and like the subway, like there's so much going on, you can't really like zone out like that. So that's
Yeah.
one thing that I think is like super important for like my creativity, just having time to kind of zone out. Running has been a bit helpful for that because it is kind of like zoning out while watching for
Yeah.
cars, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but
It's zoning in. It's zoning in.
yeah, zoning. Ooh, I like that, zoning in, so you can kind of let your creativity blossom. But I wanted to ask a question about what's your take on if social media is a net positive for creativity? So being able to see and compare,
Mm.
and but also cultivate and be curious about other people's work in comparison to your own, or do you think it's potentially harmful to creativity because we can see so many other things that are similar or very different or better or worse than ours?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Um, I think it's a mix, right? It's got to be a mix. I think also it depends on your mindset.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for some people, if you tend to operate in a like glass half empty mindset, you're gonna focus on what's so negative about the space and what it means to you. But I'm a half full kind of girl,
Mm-hmm.
like give me what it is that's going to inspire me. And I think that is going to change like person to person. But I think at the larger scope of like, what is social media really doing, right? We're in a massive experiment right now. This is the
Yeah.
first time in history that we've scaled the internet to this degree, and nobody knows what impacts it's really going to have on society as a whole or as people as a whole. But I think, yeah, when we look at different platforms, and I mean, I think you and I are in agreement. Like, if you're on a platform, that clock app is probably the best one in terms of cultivating
Mm-hmm.
what sources of creativity you're able to see, but also how incredibly powerful it is at influencing pop culture,
Oh
right?
yeah, big
And
time.
I think that is the positive part in some ways. I mean, look at like how much more exposed we are to food, to ideas, to
Oh
different
yeah.
types of people. Like, hi, I live in suburban white America. And there are a lot of faces and uh, backgrounds and cultural experiences that I don't get to witness in this space. That being said, I've traveled a lot and I've done a lot of right. That's we'll get into that. That goes up to I have this theory around like this 4 points to happiness, and travel is one of those points, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned that being able to have that open mind and being able to be exposed to things on the internet gives people that can't travel, that can't see these other places, this incredible first look at what it is to live differently than what you're used to. And to me, that's always going to be one of the most powerful things about social media, our ability to go beyond our little bubbles and
Mm-hmm.
also find new communities that speak to us in ways that aren't at home.
Totally. I 100 million% agree. Like media in general is so powerful and important for that sort of thing. And one of the things I've said for a long time is like if we could just, obviously to your point, that not everyone has the ability to travel or go over or meet people from other places, but the what we present them can be in a digital form can be so impactful. And obviously, for the longest time, it was just TV, it was just movies, it was maybe the radio, I guess, which, whatever. But that, there's so much bias in that. And there's not that there's not bias in social media, of course, but to
Right.
actually get information from the source and not told through the lens of someone talking about other people's experiences is like such a impressive and important part of what social media can do and does do. Obviously, with every good thing there are caveats, but I
Yeah.
do fully agree that like the peeling back the curtain of people's lives in far away places is so vital for hopefully in the long run helping bring everybody together in a way that, you know, just living in your bubble will never ever obviously be able to do.
Right. And I think you get drawn to the experiences that are different than yours, right? Like here I am watching creators that are spending $10,000 a month and reporting like, look at these bags or, look at these like incredible like club things that we did in New York tonight. And I'm like,
Hmm.
wow, that's never going to be my life. I'm never going to have a trust fund daddy who's just like letting me pay whatever I want. And then on the opposite spectrum, right, is like people that have like 4 kids or 5 kids. Like I'm a single childless cat lady. Like I have no perspective on what it means to have a constant stream of people in my house
Hmm.
or in my place. And so I think we're drawn to that. I don't want to watch, well I do. I love watching people like me, but it's far less interesting than these like different dynamics. And I think, yeah, we're so lucky to be able to live in a time where we're able to see that, but also it's such an interesting thing to look at. How does it compare to the media landscape, right? We talk a
Hmm.
lot about like the role of social media with misinformation and disinformation, right? But also, what does that mean for journalists,
Yeah.
right? And I think we're starting to see this, right? This creator economy. And I work with this journalist who is also part of a, major like journalistic media news outlet.
Hmm.
But, like, how do we establish her as this expert in this area that she talks about? She already is, right? But she doesn't need the outlet and the organization she works for to do that. And I think, like, so from that perspective, right, we trust media sources,
Hmm.
some. We
Some of them.
trust
Well,
some media sources,
yeah.
but I think part of the downfall of the media industry is the creator industry
Hmm.
and being able to take out the middleman and speak directly to the people, to your consumers, to those individuals you're trying to reach. And in some ways, that's really amazing. But also, we know there's a flip side to that. Anyone
Yep.
can just stand up and not have done the research or have the background or have talked to the sources and good, reputable sources.
Hmm.
Um, and I think I would love to see that change in the future. And I think it is, right? I think when I look to people like you and other creators I follow, right? And I think this, like, they're doing it right.
Hmm.
And that's why I follow them. But also, I think it comes back when you're in the creative space on social media, coming back to authenticity. And I think
Yeah.
authenticity is key in the creative process overall. And that's how I look at like my 4 points to happiness, right? And I'll just kind of briefly explain what that is. For
Please
me,
do.
it came up in a time, I was fresh out of college, early 20s. You kind of hit your first like wall, right? And I guess
Hmm.
we kind of coined it back then, and we still do, that quarter life crisis, right? Like,
I
ah,
had one of
gosh,
those. Yep.
yeah, what are we doing? And I remember like sitting at the base of like my claw foot shower bathtub and just like realizing I was crying. Like I thought it was like the thing, and I was like, oh
Hmm.
my God, I'm depressed.
Mm.
Right? Like
Yeah.
that's the first time that I ever really felt out of place. And
Hmm.
I think they say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah, they
Um,
say that, man.
but it's different, right? And so I really had to sit with it. And during this time, I was like super fit. I was training for a half marathon. I was doing like half vinyasa yoga 5 times a week. I was like training with a trainer, weightlifting. I was eating the cleanest I've ever eaten. I was doing all the things, right, that they tell you to do. And
Hmm.
I couldn't figure out what was wrong. And so it was on that bathroom floor, right? When is it not? When is your most critical moment not going to take place on a
Yeah,
bathroom floor?
bathroom floors need more credit. They're doing the just great work out there.
Right. They're doing everything, like from your ideas to whatever. And this is where I kind of said, well, what do I do? Like how do I focus on what's in my control? And I kind of like over time I just was like, well, what brings me joy every
Hmm.
day? What's a thing that I can do that brings joy into my life that isn't dependent on something else.
Yeah.
And so it took me like probably a month, right, to kind of really figure it out. And I wasn't like actively thinking about it all the time. I was just trying to note and reflect on like what does that for me. And I made a list. And mine, I call it the 4 points of happiness because I came up with four things. And you said music, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the same for me. Music,
Nice.
concerts. I think we all like, oh man, a concert,
The
the
feeling you
energy.
get, like when you can just like scream, sing, and jump and like block out the
Yeah.
world for an hour or two. Oh,
Black out the world and also be in this like isolated cocoon with people that feel the same way you do. I mean,
mm-hmm.
the energy at a concert is palpable,
Oh yeah.
palpable. And like the fucking speakers when they just
Yeah.
like blare in your chest
You
and
can feel it, literally.
literally. And so I was like, okay, well, I can listen to music on my commute, I can listen when I'm walking, I can listen when I'm doing things around the house. So I was like, okay, if I'm feeling in a slump, I'm going to put on an album and whatever. And what's really great, and you and I've talked about this before, I got a
Mm-hmm.
record player a few years ago.
Yes.
I use it as a timer because
Ooh.
like one side is what, like 20, twenty
Yeah.
five minutes, and that's actually like a Pomodoro.
I was gonna
um
say like the Pomodoro. I was like, oh, that I can use it for Pomodoro technique. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's what I started doing. But it was like that. Like, okay, like I gotta clean my room. I don't want to do it. I can't do it. I'm gonna put on one song. I'll put on one song. It's gonna pump me up. All I have to do is clean for one song. All I have to do is walk for one song if I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to like do a new like run record or run for one song. See how I feel. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, that was enough, I'm gonna call it, move on. So that was like one way that I could keep something in my control. Cooking is another
Mm.
thing. I
I like
think
that.
there's a lot of creativity in cooking. I think from like what type of cuisine can you try to what foods are new that you haven't had, but also just like the actual process of
Yeah.
cooking. I think for a lot of people, baking is actually really relaxing because you can't not follow a baking recipe
Mm-hmm.
perfectly. But for me, so that's like a meditative version. But for me, creativity is like, oh my God, I have all this shit in the fridge.
Yeah.
What am I gonna throw
What can
together?
I cook up here? Yeah,
Yeah,
literally.
like chef's hat, give me my little Remy. You know what I mean? Like let's tap into inspiration that way. So cooking became one of them. Travel, as I already mentioned, was huge for me. Um and then the last category and is self-expression. And I had to
Mm,
kind of lump that into one thing
sure.
because to me, self-expression, like I said, I do yoga. That is a natural form for my body
Yeah.
to feel like it's being used in the best way. But it's also, I do like adult coloring books. Like I sit down for like
Nice.
3 to 5 hours. I have such a crazy process. And I remember the first time I sat down to do an adult coloring book. If you want to know what your self-talk is, please
Yes.
like sit it because you get overwhelmed. Like, first of all, you're not coloring for anyone else. Let's be clear about that.
Right.
And I remember the first one or two times, and I was doing this to tap into what I loved as a kid, what would calm
Mm-hmm.
me down as a kid. I had a lot of anger issues, and that was always like my first step into like
Yeah.
breathing. And so I said, "Oh, let's do this." And I remember I like was mad at myself for picking up the wrong colors or for like
Mm,
starting like the smallest place, right? And being like, oh, I hate that already.
yeah.
And I still have a whole page to go.
Right.
And it was just kind of crazy. And I remember like after the first couple times, I'm like, Annie, are you really talking to yourself this way? Like this is just for you. And I think when I kind of realized that, I said, oh, right. And now, bro, I have like one leaf, and it's got 5 colors in it. That's what I
Yeah.
learned. I was like, I don't have to stick with that one color.
Yeah.
And I've got they're kind of trippy. Like I love this like kind of bright acidy colors on like
Mm-hmm.
weird things. So I've almost developed my own coloring style, which is, really cool. But I think to me and to anyone else, like that is an amazing way to do it because
Mm,
once I found these four things,
yeah.
and obviously self expression is a very large thing. Um, I was like, okay, I need to do one of these things a day to get
Ooh.
rid of my mental state.
Yeah, I like that.
But you know what happens when you start to do one a day? Then you're like, well, why aren't I doing all of them?
Yeah.
And like after that, I took about 6 months, and then I went on my first like solo travel trip. Um, to Southeast Asia was amazing, and I decided, oh, I'm going to do yoga teacher training. So what ended up happening is starting with these one points and pieces a day ended up becoming larger and larger portions of my life,
Yeah.
right? They took up more time. Like I went on a 9-month journey, doing two of the things I love. I brought a coloring book. Like
There you go.
I brought those things with me to this day. I still bring a coloring book whenever I travel, but it is because I had tapped into my own source of joy, my own source of authenticity that made me feel like, oh, I can speak positively to myself, but also go outside my regular bubble of what do I
Mm-hmm.
have to do today or what lifestyle things are bringing me down. And I think when you look at your life and your creativity from that kind of perspective, right? It only helps it grow.
Yeah.
And then guess what? Within like 3 months, I had totally, well, before I traveled, let's be clear, I was like, I can't mentally go in a state to solo travel
Sure.
if I'm depressed. But like it totally flipped the script, and joy and creativity and happiness were easier for me to tap into because it wasn't dependent on an external source.
Yeah, something that you could create for yourself. You had the controls in your hand, and you're like, hey, I can't control the things happening in the world or like the feelings I'm having, but if I can do some of these four things, if not all four things, and I know that I've done
Right.
all the things that I know can fill me up in that way and help me feel a bit better.
Exactly. And I put it on a Post-it note, right? I put the
Yeah.
Post-it note next to my bed or in my bathroom on the mirror, and I would just I didn't check it off. I didn't make it a task.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew like, oh, I'm not feeling great right now. I've got many things at my disposal I can do immediately.
Yep.
And then at the end of the day or the beginning of the day, did I do one? Did I do more? And it really kind of set the foundation. And I still to this day I think that. And I notice that
Mm-hmm.
when I'm not feeling great, I'm not feeling creative, I need to do one of those things.
Do you think that creativity is a necessity in life in some any way, shape, or form?
Oh, yes. Yes. 100%. I don't think I think what's hard is we see these things online, we see these shows, we read these books, and we think, I could never do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people are obviously not. They're like, oh, I'm gonna crush it. I'm gonna go out there. I'm gonna put myself
Yeah.
into the world. I don't think a majority of people start on a journey and think like, oh yeah, I'm gonna crush that. I'm gonna do that. I think they're intimidated by
Mm-hmm.
the process. And I think letting go of that expectation that the first thing you
Mm.
have to do has to be incredible from the get-go, that it has to be the best, biggest version of what you want it to be. Because obviously, I think that hinders a lot of people,
Yeah.
right?
Just that
Like
fear.
that fear and that, like, I have goals, right? I have goals, and I'm trying to figure out like how do I continue to expand my own bubble, right? Like I've gotten into a mindset of like humbled and hungry, and
Mm-hmm.
that's
Ooh,
also
I love
about,
that. Put that on a bumper
yeah.
sticker. That's great.
I know. Yeah, I think it was like after a year of just kind of not, I was unemployed. I wasn't sure what was coming next. And I kind of learned like you can't put all your eggs in one basket anymore. And we always knew like a side hustle was something.
Yep.
Like everyone should do that. Eventually maybe your side hustle becomes your bigger thing. But when you sit down to be like, oh, that's what my side hustle is going to be, like for me personally, I'm like, oh, I got to blow it out immediately, full vision,
Mm-hmm.
5-year plan. Let's do what they taught me. How much has that stopped me from taking the first step on a
Oh,
creative path?
big time. Yeah. I do the same thing where you start to extrapolate out this idea, and it's like you can just start. And that's something I've been trying to do more of, is like just start. You can figure out all the other things later. Even if it's like little, not to plug my newsletter, but if it's like teeny tiny small steps, right? That forward momentum is going to be way more impactful than planning out the next however many months, moons, whatever, just getting going is going to be way better. So I think you, me, as so many people are crippled by the planning stop that happens when you get an idea. But on that note, I do want to ask you, because I'm curious. I asked my last guest about this too. What's your take on creating art for art's sake, and then creating art for like selling it or money or like that sort of thing?
Oh, this is a good one. It's actually kind of funny. My dad is an artist,
Mm-hmm.
and growing up, I thought being an artist was a joke. Here my father is. I mean, he's the perfect example for this question, because on one side he did like corporate design, right? So in-house designer at big corporations, like rest in peace Kmart, but he was doing Joe Boxer and Martha Stewart and like things that went on clothes, things that went on whatever. He was salaried, he was, working on a computer, and that was his whole life. But he did that because he had two kids and a wife and, responsibilities. But before that and after that, his art was his passion.
Mm-hmm.
And I I mean, I think this is what's so interesting is like he started because he just loved doing art and he was getting big in his area, and then they moved from my mom's job. My mom was actually the breadwinner for our whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And then in his 60s, he went back and got his MFA to college and was
That's
like,
amazing.
yeah, and, like, I consider myself a lifelong learner because I have an example of what it means to continuously seek out curiosity and
Mm-hmm.
information and things that are different than you. To me, like, I'm, like, incredibly impressed by that. And then when he retired, he started printing again. He does silkscreen prints. He does fine silkscreen prints, and most people use, like, 2 to 3 colors.
Mm-hmm.
He uses 23 to 60.
Oh
It's
my
like
gosh.
crazy process. It takes months for him to create one piece of artwork because you have to
Yeah.
let it dry between layers. And it's a passion for him, and he cannot function if he like hurt his shoulder. He's
Mm-hmm.
old now. He's 76 and he's still printing every day, and he had to have surgery on his shoulder. And that man, the minute his PT person was like, "Oh, I'm like, you're good," he was
Mm-hmm.
back in the saddle to do it. But here I am, a daughter of this incredibly talented artist who has spent his life doing it for passion, for money.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought art is ridiculous. Like
Right.
you can't do art. I didn't take a single art class until I got to college, and only because I tried to do this design specialization. So I ended up getting into a special program for design in college for this. And it was then that I kind of realized art has to come from yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? For it to be good. Um, but that doesn't mean that it can't also be sold. I mean, he's
Mm.
retired. He's making like 30 to 40 grand on the art he's made over the years.
Yeah.
And that's his passion art. It's not the work he did day to day. And so
Yeah.
to me, if you start with passion, it leads you to profit.
Mm. Yeah. That's beautiful. I like that. Start with passion, leads to profit. Take notes, people. That's one to take to the bank, literally, hopefully, if it's working for
Yeah.
you.
What did your last guest say? Or what is your thought on that?
My thought on it is, I think it's a really complicated question, but I tend to agree that I don't necessarily have an issue with art being used for profit or to make a living or selling to the man, whatever. Um, I do think that if you do sell or make art in that way, like specifically for a profit, that as long as it like either a like is the kind of art that you want to do, so like in some way you still have your creative control. Because I know in certain jobs you wouldn't, which is fine. But for me, I'm like I feel like you need a little bit of your own creative control there. So that would be one. Or you have an outlet to do your art exactly how you want to as well. So I've talked about on this podcast before, like the kind of push and pull of like creating for someone else. And that's typically what like a job is, right? Like you are
Mhm.
executing someone else's creative vision. And I've talked about how that like kind of drains me personally and needing like my own personal outlet. So I think as long as you have your personal outlet and aren't too burnt out to do it, or you are the one in the driver's seat when you're selling your art. Like I feel like a lot of fine artists or like painters or whatever, they are just doing their vision and getting paid for it versus working for someone doing their vision and getting paid for it. So that's kind of where I land on that thought.
Yeah. I think about you and that a lot. I think out of all the people in my life, you're one of the best examples of the doers. Like I have a lot of talkers in my life. Sometimes I'm a talker. I'll be honest. But yeah, to your like I've always admired the fact that you're able to be so creative at work, but also have you're hustling, man. You're like waking up early to do your runs, to do your podcast, to film your own videos, to find your voice, to do your t-shirts, right? I think you've really done the things. And I agree. Like like sometimes some of my clients suck all my creative energy out.
Yeah, it's really hard.
Um, Especially like, one of my jobs, I get to take content that already exists and cut it down into different snippets or figure out how to reuse it. Other ones, I have to come up with 20 different ideas every week.
Yeah.
And I have to, yeah, find the inspiration, source it, script it, all these things. And I think sometimes this one can be really draining, and I'm like, oh, I just want to go over here and do the stuff that's already created and let my creativity flourish from a point of already existing.
Mm-hmm.
And then other days I wake up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so inspired to come up with all these video ideas.
Yep.
And I think that's like the grocery market thing, right?
Yes.
Right? Yeah, have you know this? Like if when you
Like.
go to like Costco and there's like 1,000 choices for like pickles,
Mm-hmm.
y- how long does it take you to pick out a pickle? But if
Yeah.
you go to the store and you have two choices, like you're in and out. And I
In
think
and out.
that's how our brains work, right?
Hundred
You
percent.
you tap into things differently when you have all the options and no boundaries. And sometimes creativity comes when you already have that nugget and that idea. And personally, that's how I work, right? I love it when I'm able to sit down, I have a beginning and an end, and all I have to do is figure out the journey in between, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know how I want to start. I know what I want to say or people to do. We just got to finesse that like in between sandwich piece,
Yep.
right? And I think that's probably a perfect analogy for creativity is look at a sandwich,
Mm,
right?
I'm loving this analogy. Please tell me more. What's on the sandwich?
You have two pieces of bread. One, the creativity, you can pick whatever bread you want. Yay, bagel, wrap, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's what goes in the middle. And you're not going to want the same sandwich every day,
No.
right? Like one day, and you could be like, right? You could have, I don't know, what's your favorite sandwich, Ikey? I feel like you're like a
Oh
steak hanger
man,
guy.
I'm a big fan of Cubanos.
Oh,
Like
okay. Well,
that
that's a bad
bread.
example.
I know. Okay. Well,
No,
Cubanos are
tell me
great,
more
but
about
like
your Cubano. Tell me more about it. The
I don't even know
bread,
what's on there.
the
Well,
press.
I want to do a shout out to Wegman subs. Actually, that's what I'll do. The what's it called? Danny's favorite. Have you had that before? Oh, you're not from this area. Maybe
I'm
not.
not East. I'm not
Oh
East.
man, Danny's
Um,
favorite is great. I don't even know what's on it, but it's good. I'm not
you
helping
know,
with this analogy, but
no.
now I'm hungry.
Well, we'll cut this part. Actually, there is a girl on TikTok. Her name's Libby. Her and her husband live in LA, and I watched this right now. They're doing a sandwich bracket. Essentially, they went to
Ooh,
all the hot spots in LA to try the best sandwiches and decide like what's the best one. Well, they've narrowed it down to like the sweet 16 of sandwiches. They're all number one seeds, but I'm so entertained because I'm not the biggest sandwich girl, but this makes me want to be a sandwich girl. But the whole point of like what I was getting at was like, right, you could make a steak sandwich 12 different ways.
oh
You could
yeah,
make a vegetarian sandwich 1,000 different ways. And I think that's what creativity is, right? You take two pieces of bun, you're always going to have two pieces of bun, but you get to jazz up what you want the inside to look like, what you're going to put on it, how it's going to make you feel, what you're going to feel at the end. Do you want it for comfort? Do you want it for energy? Do you want it for cold and crunchy because it's hot out? Do you want
Mm,
it warm and like savory because it's cold out? I mean, that's what creativity is. It's a sandwich of ideas and moments, and it's going to change from day to day, from taste to feeling to whatever's going on with yourself. And I think when we get too prescriptive about our creativity, that it
mm-hmm.
always has to show up in one way or it always has to show up at this time, I mean, that's gonna hinder your real progress. You know, like
Yeah.
I keep a notepad by my bed. One, because who doesn't think of all their to-do lists right before they go to bed?
Yep.
But two, sometimes it's the first moment of quiet that my brain isn't
Mm,
doing things for the day. And I sometimes I sit up and I actually like have to get my computer and start writing and start doing what I want to do. And other times I'm like, oh, that's a good one to come back to. And I
mm-hmm.
just write it down. But I think that's it, right? It's a creative sandwich every day. You get to fill it as much as you want. You get to be as simple as you want. If you want a grilled cheese, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you get 3 ingredients. It doesn't,
Yeah.
or it could be the gourmet one with the apples and the brie and the hot honey, right? Like you can get creative. And I think clearly, like that's just, like, of course, my 4 points of happiness. Here I am talking about sandwiches like 10 minutes later. But, it just like that's what you do. You just tap into it where you can, and you let the journey take you to where it needs to go without this, oh, it has to be perfect and it has
Mm-hmm.
to be this thing that I'm going to sell at the end of the day. If you get really passionate about making sandwiches, bro, like you're chef, like get your truck, go across the country, do a John Favreau kind of
Yes.
moment for yourself. I mean,
Chef
that's one of my
2.0.
favorites.
Great
Yeah.
movie.
But that's what happens. It becomes what you want it to be when you start from a place that is your own.
I love that. Creativity is a sandwich. I think I'm going to call this episode that because that is like so profound and but also like intriguing and creative. So, okay, we're going to have to do a part 2 because I could talk to you all day, Annie. As you know, we are friends. We've known each other for some time now. But before we wrap, I do want to do something we do on every episode, whereas we have the amazing guest, people that have been listening to this. Hopefully, they've been incredibly inspired. I'm sure they have. I know I am after this conversation. But if you could give 3 quick tips for people listening, what would they be?
One, find your own points to happiness. That's a great
Mm,
starting place, right? It doesn't have to be all at once. You don't have to sit down and be like, "What makes me happy?" That's too prescriptive. It should be recognizing, right? Like, let's start by being observant with our own life, right? Like, what do we love about what we do every day, and what do we need more of? And
mm-hmm.
that's kind of where you start. Then tap into those constant sources of creativity, of joy, whatever that word is for you. I don't think they're exclusive. And then I would say 3, like, continue to be curious.
Mm,
Tap into things that aren't in your everyday, whether it's looking at new creators online, whether it's watching that documentary that you think you have no interest in,
mm-hmm.
that like get outside, right? And I think that probably is the last thing. Like, I don't know anyone on this earth that doesn't feel better, think better, have more insights of creativity when you don't move your body. Like, moving your body in whatever way, that zoning in, that zoning out, whatever you want to call it. If running is your thing, if CrossFit is your thing, if it's yoga or Zumba or Pilates, find something that makes you feel like your blood is pumping, your heart is beating, your breath is breathing, like we are alive. So make it known.
Yes.
And then when you come back and you have all these things that are together, you're going to sit down and feel like, oh, here we go. Here's where the creativity starts, and it's going to be easier.
I love that. These are fantastic pieces of advice. Annie, this has been an absolute pleasure. An amazing way for those who are listening. It's like a Friday morning at 8 a.m. This has been the best way to start the day. And I'm so happy that we were able to chat. And I will be back. I'm coming back for you because there's a lot more things that I feel like we could talk about that people will enjoy. But for now, I just want to say thank you for joining on the pursuit of creativity.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I can't wait for the next one. I'm sure we'll keep talking and chatting in the meantime. So
Absolutely.
thanks again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me for yet another episode of The Pursuit of Creativity. If you enjoyed this conversation, if you got something from it, be sure to leave a like, a comment, a review, a rating, share it with a friend. Any interaction is incredibly helpful and I would really appreciate it. For more updates, be sure to subscribe to my Substack newsletter. It's called Small Steps. You'll get a weekly dose of intentional conversation about bettering and improving ourselves and our community. All these things will be linked in the show notes, of course. So once again, my name is Ikey Ajavon. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for being here. And as usual, stay optimistic. Better days are coming.